The silence in the bridal suite was deafening. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence you expect before the happiest moment of your life. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes your heart hammer a frantic rhythm against your ribs. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, smoothing the delicate lace of my gown. It was a beautiful dress, ivory with subtle pearl beading that caught the light, but all I could look at was the reflection of the woman wearing it. My eyes were red-rimmed, despite the makeup artist's best efforts. My phone buzzed on the vanity table. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I knew who it was before I even looked. Or rather, I knew who it wasn't. It wasn't a congratulatory text. It wasn't a, "We're on our way, sweetheart." I picked it up. A message from Mom. "Heather, we can't make it. Kyle is having a crisis. He needs us. We'll send a gift later. Have a good day." Have a good day. Not have a wonderful wedding. Just have a good day. As if I were going to the grocery store instead of walking down the aisle. My stomach churned, a mix of nausea and a cold, hard stone of realization dropping into my gut. Kyle, my older brother, the golden child. He was 38 years old, yet he always seemed to have a crisis exactly when I had a milestone. "Heather?" I turned. Martha, my wedding coordinator, stood in the doorway, her face a mask of professional sympathy. She had checked the seating chart. She knew. "It's time, honey," she said softly. "Everyone is seated." Is the front row still empty?" Martha hesitated, then nodded. "We can remove the chairs if you want, rearrange the spacing." "No," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, hollow but firm. "Leave them. I want everyone to see them." Walking down that aisle was the longest journey of my life. The music played, Pachelbel's Canon, the song I dreamed of since I was a little girl, but I barely heard it. All I could see were those 3 wooden chairs in the front row, right on the bride's side, reserved for mother of the bride, reserved for father of the bride, reserved for brother of the bride. They stood there like gaping wounds. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me. Not just the admiration for the dress or the occasion, but the pity. The whispers rippled through the pews like a cold breeze. Where are her parents? Is she an orphan? No, I met them at the engagement party. I kept my chin up. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. At the end of the aisle stood Liam, my Liam. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but it was the look in his eyes that saved me. He wasn't looking at the empty chairs. He was looking at me with such fierce, protective love that it almost brought me to my knees. When I reached him, he took my ice-cold hands in his warm ones. He leaned in, ignoring the priest for a second. "I'm here," he whispered, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "I'm your family now, Heather, and I'm not going anywhere." We got through the vows. I said, "I do," with a cracked voice. We kissed. We walked back up the aisle as husband and wife. But the moment we got into the limo, the facade crumbled. I pulled out my phone again. I shouldn't have done it. I should have just enjoyed my wedding. But I had to know what crisis was so important that it warranted missing the only wedding of their only daughter. I opened Instagram, and there it was, posted 20 minutes ago. A photo of my brother, Kyle. He was holding a glass of champagne, grinning like a Cheshire cat. He wasn't in a hospital. He wasn't in a jail cell. He was at the Sapphire Sands Resort and Casino 3 hours away. The caption read, "Big things coming, celebrating the pre-launch of my new venture with the best investors in the world, Mom and Dad." In the background of the selfie, blurred but unmistakable, were my parents. My mother was laughing, holding a cocktail. My father was looking at a menu. They weren't handling a crisis. They were celebrating another one of Kyle's business ideas that would inevitably fail in 6 months. They had chosen a casino buffet over walking me down the aisle. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred into a watery mess. "Heather?" Liam asked gently. I showed him the phone. His jaw tightened. A vein in his temple pulsed, the only sign of his immense anger. "They made their choice," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The tears finally spilled over, hot and stinging. They finally made it perfectly clear where I stand. I looked out the window of the limo at the passing city. Something inside me broke that day. But looking back, I realized it wasn't a break. It was a severance. The tether of guilt, obligation, and desperate hope that had bound me to them for 30 years had finally snapped. I wiped my eyes, careful not to smudge the mascara too much. I looked at the empty seat next to me where my father should have been sitting to tell me I looked beautiful. "Driver," I said, my voice hardening, "take us to the reception. We have a party to enjoy." That was the day the old Heather died. The Heather who begged for scraps of affection. The Heather who thought if she just achieved enough, earned enough, or was good enough, they would finally see her. She was gone, and in her place, something else was beginning to grow. Something colder. Something calculating. To understand why the empty chairs hurt so much, you have to understand the 20 years that led up to that moment. You have to understand the dynamic of the glass child. That was me, see-through, easily broken, dangerous only if you stepped on the shards. My childhood wasn't abusive in the way you see in movies. There were no beatings, there was food on the table, but there is a specific kind of neglect that happens when one child takes up all the oxygen in the room. Kyle was the sun our family orbited around. If Kyle had a soccer game, we all went. If Kyle got a C on a math test, it was a crisis that required tutors and parent-teacher conferences. If Kyle wanted a new gaming console, budget adjustments were made. Me? I was the scenery. I remember when I was 8 years old. I had won the state spelling bee. It was a huge deal for a third grader. I remember standing on that stage, clutching the trophy, scanning the audience for my parents. I saw other parents waving, taking photos, cheering. My parents weren't there. Kyle had twisted his ankle at practice that morning. It wasn't broken, just a sprain, but my mother insisted he needed to be monitored on the couch with ice packs and movies. When I got home, bursting with pride, trophy in hand, I walked into the living room. "Shh," my mother hissed, putting a finger to her lips. "Kyle is finally sleeping. Don't make so much noise, Heather." I stood there, the gold plastic trophy feeling heavy in my hands. "I won," I whispered. "That's nice, dear," she said, turning back to the TV. "Put it on the shelf in your room." That was it. "That's nice, dear." But the real betrayal, the one that still makes my blood boil when I think about it, happened when I was 18. I had worked my tail off in high school. Straight A's, AP classes, beta club president. I did it all because I had a dream. I wanted to go to Duke University. And I got in. I remember the day the acceptance letter came. I placed it on the kitchen table during dinner, waiting for the right moment. "Mom, Dad," I started, my heart racing. I got in. I got into Duke." My father chewed his steak slowly. He didn't look up. "That's an expensive school, Heather." "I know," I said quickly. "But we have the college fund, right? You guys said Grandma started one for both of us when we were born." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at his plate. Kyle, who was 22 at the time and living in the basement after flunking out of community college, just smirked. "Well," my father cleared his throat, "about that fund. The money isn't there anymore, Heather. my mother said, her voice casual, as if she were telling me we were out of milk. What? I felt the room spin. What do you mean? We had to use it, Dad said, finally looking at me, his eyes defensive. 2 years ago, when Kyle had that legal trouble. Legal trouble. That was their code word for when Kyle got a DUI and crashed his truck into a parked police cruiser. You used my college fund to pay for Kyle's lawyer? My voice rose an octave. And to pay his fines? We had to keep him out of jail, Heather, my mother snapped, slamming her fork down. He's your brother. Family helps family. But that was my money, I argued, tears streaming down my face. Grandma left that for my education. Money is money, my father said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Besides, you're smart, you can get scholarships. Or go to state, it's just as good. Kyle didn't have those options. He needed help. He needed help. That was the refrain of my life. Kyle needed help because he was incompetent. I was punished because I was capable. I ended up going to a state school. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing, tutoring, and library shifts to pay my tuition. I graduated with honors, 0 debt, thanks to my own blood and sweat, and a degree in accounting. They didn't come to my graduation either. Kyle had a potential job interview in another city, and they wanted to drive him there to support him. He didn't get the job. I learned a valuable lesson that day at the dinner table, though. I learned that in my family, incompetence was rewarded with resources, and competence was punished with neglect. I was the safety net they didn't have to pay for. I was the retirement plan they assumed would always be there. But they didn't know that while I was scrubbing tables and studying tax law until 3 a.m., I was keeping score. I wasn't just learning how to balance books. I was learning how to find hidden things. I was learning that numbers don't lie, even when people do. And I swore to myself that I would never, ever let them control my financial destiny again. 5 years. That's how long it had been since the wedding. 5 years of radio silence, punctuated only by the occasional generic holiday text from my mother or a request for a small loan from Kyle, which I always ignored. In those 5 years, I didn't just survive, I thrived. Liam and I built a life that was quiet, peaceful, and incredibly successful. Liam was an architect, specializing in sustainable luxury homes. And me, I became a forensic accountant. It's not the kind of accounting most people think of. I don't just file taxes. I hunt. I'm hired by law firms, corporations, and sometimes the government to find money that people are trying to hide. Embezzlement, money laundering, hidden assets in divorce cases, that's my playground. I have a knack for it. Maybe because I spent my whole life analyzing the discrepancies in my parents' love, I became an expert at spotting discrepancies in ledgers. I can look at a spreadsheet and see the story behind the numbers, the greed, the fear, the lies. My career skyrocketed. By 34, I was a partner at my firm. My hourly rate was higher than what my father used to make in a week. But my parents knew none of this. To them, I was just Heather. Boring Heather, probably working in a cubicle somewhere, making ends meet. Because I had blocked them on Facebook and never updated my LinkedIn, they had no window into my world. They didn't know about the penthouse Liam and I bought in the city. They didn't know about our vacation home in Aspen. They didn't know that our net worth had just crossed the 8-figure mark. I preferred it that way. Silence was my shield. Meanwhile, through the grapevine of distant relatives and the occasional curiosity-driven background check, hazard of the job, I knew exactly what they were doing. They were drowning. Kyle's ventures had bled my parents dry. My father, Robert, should have retired 3 years ago, but he was still working shifts at the hardware store. My mother, Brenda, had taken out a second mortgage on the family home, the house I grew up in. Kyle was currently between opportunities. living in a rental apartment that I suspected my parents were paying for. He had a messy divorce behind him, a toddler he rarely saw, and a gambling habit he wasn't hiding very well. I watched it all from a distance. I didn't intervene. I didn't offer help. I was the bad daughter, remember? The one who walked away. Sometimes, late at night, I would feel a pang of guilt. It's hard to kill that biological urge to help your parents, no matter how toxic they are. I would think about my dad's tired eyes or my mom's frantic need to keep up appearances. They dug their own grave, Heather, Liam would remind me, handing me a glass of wine as we looked out over the city skyline. If you give them an inch, they will take everything we've built. They will feed it to Kyle, and it will be gone in a week. He was right. I knew he was right. So I kept my mouth shut. I focused on my work. I focused on the people who actually loved me, Liam, my team at work, and a small circle of friends who knew my worth. But then I made one mistake. Or maybe, subconsciously, it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was a lure. I unblocked my mother on Instagram, just for a moment, just to check something. But I forgot to reblock her. And then I bought the car. It was a reward for closing the biggest case of my career, a massive corporate fraud investigation that recovered $40 million for a client. My bonus alone was enough to buy a small house. But I didn't want a house. I wanted something I had dreamed of since I was 16 and saw a poster on a wall, a Porsche Panamera, jet black, leather interior, the kind of car that purrs like a panther and moves like a ghost. Price tag, $135,000. I paid cash. I remember standing in the dealership parking lot, the keys heavy and cool in my hand. I felt powerful. I felt like I had finally scrubbed off the grime of being the forgotten child. I took a picture, just one, me leaning against the hood, sunglasses on, a rare, genuine smile on my face. I posted it to Instagram. The caption was simple: "Hard work pays off. Welcome to the family." I didn't tag anyone. I didn't think much of it. That was Tuesday. For 3 days, nothing happened. The likes rolled in from friends and colleagues. Liam commented with a fire emoji. Then came Friday. My phone rang. The screen flashed a name I hadn't seen pop up in years. Mom. I stared at it. My heart did that familiar stutter step, a reflex of fear from childhood. But then I looked at my Porsche parked in the driveway. I looked at my reflection in the window, a successful, self-made woman. I swiped answer. Hello? Heather? Her voice was shrill, breathless. There was no "how are you?" No "long time no see." Hi, Mom. We saw the picture, she said. No preamble. The car. Is it yours or is it Liam's? It's mine, Mom. Why? Well, she let out a scuff that sounded like a laugh. That's extravagant. Must be nice. I worked hard for it. Listen, she cut me off. Her tone shifted. It became the voice she used when she was trying to sound authoritative, the voice she used to command me when I was 10. We need to talk, all of us. Family meeting tomorrow at the house. I'm busy, Mom. No, you're not, she snapped. Not for this. It's about Kyle and us. It's an emergency, Heather. You need to come home. I was about to hang up. I was about to tell her to go to hell. But then, she didn't hang up properly. She must have lowered the phone, thinking the call was disconnected. I heard her voice, muffled but distinct, speaking to someone else in the room, probably my father. She's coming. Don't worry, Bob. Did you see that car? If she has money for that, she has money to fix this mess. We just have to guilt her a little. She's always been soft. We'll get the money for Kyle. Click. The line went dead. I sat there, freezing cold in my sun-drenched living room. She's always been soft. We'll get the money for Kyle. Something inside me didn't just break this time. It solidified. It turned into diamond, hard, sharp, and unbreakable. They thought I was the same Heather. They thought I was the ATM they had forgotten to use for 5 years. They thought they could snap their fingers and I would open my checkbook to save the brother who couldn't be bothered to watch me get married. I looked at the phone. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "You want a meeting? Let's have a meeting." I wasn't going to go there as a daughter. I was going to go there as a forensic accountant, and I wasn't bringing a checkbook. Before I could walk into the lion's den, I needed ammunition. I knew my parents. They dealt in emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and vague stories about bad luck. If I went in there with just my feelings, they would twist everything until I was the villain. I needed facts. I needed the receipts. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved years ago but never used. "Hello?" A cautious, tired female voice answered. "Jessica? It's Heather, Kyle's sister." There was a long silence on the other end. Jessica was Kyle's ex-wife. They had been divorced for 3 years. The last I heard, the split was acrimonious, involving restraining orders and screaming matches on the front lawn. "Heather," she said, her tone guarding. "What do you want? If this is about him trying to lower the child support again, tell him to talk to my lawyer." "I'm not calling for him," I said quickly. "I'm calling because, well, my parents just summoned me to a family meeting to ask for money, presumably to bail Kyle out of something." Jessica let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Oh, honey, they're not just bailing him out. They're trying to keep him out of prison." My grip on the phone tightened. "Prison?" "Listen," Jessica sighed. "I can't talk about this over the phone, but if you're really going over there, you need to know what you're walking into. Meet me?" We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Jessica looked 10 years older than her age. She looked like a woman who had been running a marathon with weights on her ankles. She didn't waste time. She slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "I kept copies," she said, taking a sip of black coffee, "of everything. Before I left him, I went through the filing cabinet. I knew he would try to hide assets or lie about his income to avoid paying for Lily." I opened the envelope. As a forensic accountant, this was like reading a map of a train wreck. There were bank statements showing withdrawals from my parents' retirement accounts deposited directly into Kyle's business accounts. There were notices from the IRS. But the kicker was a document near the bottom. "Look at the loan application," Jessica pointed a trembling finger. It was a loan application for $50,000 from a predatory lender, dated 6 months ago. The applicant was listed as Robert and Brenda Miller, my parents. "So, they took out a loan for him," I said, feeling a familiar disgust. "Look at the signatures, Heather." I squinted. I knew my father's signature. It was spiky, jagged. I knew my mother's, looping and cursive. These signatures were shaky, traced. "He forged them?" I whispered. "He forged them," Jessica confirmed. "Your parents found out about it 2 months ago. The lender started calling the house when Kyle missed payments." "And they didn't call the police? Call the police on their golden boy?" Jessica shook her head. "No, they decided to cover it. They've been paying the interest to keep the lender from suing, but they're out of money. That's why they called you." I felt bile rise in my throat. My brother had committed a felony against our parents, identity theft, fraud, and instead of holding him accountable, they were trying to drag me in to pay off his crime. They were willing to sacrifice my financial security to cover up his sins. "There's more," Jessica said, her voice dropping. "He's doing it to others. He's been borrowing from his friends, telling them he has a hot investment. It's a Ponzi scheme, Heather. A small, stupid one, but it's fraud." She handed me a USB drive. "There are recordings on there. voicemails he left me, threatening to take Lily away if I didn't give him money. I took the USB drive. It felt heavy in my palm. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a criminal case. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. Jessica looked me in the eye. "Because he ruined my credit, he ruined my trust, and he's trying to ruin my daughter's future. If you can stop him, please, burn him down, Heather." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm not just going to stop him, Jessica. I'm going to end it." I left the coffee shop with the envelope tucked under my arm. I had the ammunition. Now I needed the weapon. I took out my phone and called my office. "Sarah, it's Heather. I need you to run a title search on a property ASAP, my parents' address. And get me the contact info for the holder of their mortgage note. I have a feeling there's a distress sale coming up." If they wanted a business meeting, they were going to get the CEO of Vengeance. The next morning, I didn't go straight to my parents' house. I went to my lawyer's office. Sarah, my legal counsel and one of my closest friends, had the documents spread out on the conference table. She looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "You realize this is nuclear, right?" she asked. "Once you sign these, there's no going back to Sunday dinners." "I haven't had a Sunday dinner with them in 5 years, Sarah," I said, scanning the papers. Here is what Sarah had found. My parents were in foreclosure. They hadn't paid their mortgage in 6 months. The bank had already initiated proceedings. The house, the one they were so desperate to protect, the one they had leveraged to fund Kyle's mistakes, was weeks away from being auctioned off on the courthouse steps. But here is the thing about distressed debt. It can be bought. Banks don't want to own houses. They want money. If a mortgage is non-performing, meaning it's not being paid, they will often sell the debt to a third party for pennies on the dollar just to get it off their books. The bank was happy to unload it, Sarah explained. They sold the note to the LLC we set up this morning, Phoenix Holdings. Very dramatic, by the way. "It fits," I said, picking up the pen. "So, to clarify," Sarah pushed her glasses up her nose. "As of this moment, your parents don't owe the bank anymore. They owe Phoenix Holdings, which is you." "They owe me $180,000, I corrected, plus arrears and penalties." I signed the document. The ink flowed smoothly. I now owned the debt on my childhood home. I held the power to evict them. I held the power to forgive them. I held all the cards. "One more thing," I said, handing Sarah the envelope Jessica had given me. "I need you to get this to Detective Miller at the Fraud Division. Tell him I'm willing to make a statement regarding the forged signatures, but only after 5 p.m. today." "Why wait?" "Because," I stood up, smoothing my blazer, "I want to see if they'll tell me the truth first. I want to give them one last chance to be decent human beings." Sarah looked at me skeptically. "And if they don't?" I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Then Detective Miller can come pick up the pieces." I walked out of the office and got into my Porsche. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. I was wearing a tailored navy suit, my audit armor, as Liam called it. No jewelry except my wedding ring and a simple diamond pendant. I looked expensive. I looked intimidating. I looked nothing like the girl who used to cry because her dad forgot her birthday. The drive to the suburbs took 45 minutes. As I turned onto the familiar street, my heart rate remained steady. I practiced my breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked tired. The paint was peeling. The lawn was overgrown. It was a physical manifestation of my parents' financial rot. And there, parked in the spot where I used to park my beat-up Honda, was Kyle's car, a leased BMW SUV. Of course, he couldn't pay his rent, but he had to drive a BMW. I parked my Porsche right behind it, blocking him in. I stepped out of the car. The click of my heels on the pavement was sharp and rhythmic. The front door opened before I even reached the porch. My mother stood there. She was wearing her church clothes, a floral blouse and slacks. She had put on lipstick. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting nervously toward the shiny black car in her driveway. "Heather!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms open as if we were best friends. "You made it! Look at you. You look prosperous." "Hello, Mom," I said, letting her hug me. Her body felt frail. She smelled like lavender and anxiety. Come in, come in," she ushered me inside. "Everyone is waiting." I stepped across the threshold. The house smelled stale, like old dust and hidden secrets. In the living room, my father sat in his recliner. He didn't get up. He just nodded at me. "Heather?" "Dad?" And then there was Kyle. He was leaning against the mantelpiece, trying to look casual, but his eyes were glued to the window, staring at my Porsche. "Nice ride, sis," he said, a sneer curling his lip. "Must be nice to have disposable income while the rest of us are grinding." "It is nice," I said coolly, setting my briefcase on the coffee table. "It drives very smooth." "Well," my mother clapped her hands together, creating a false sense of cheer, "let's all sit down. I made coffee. We have so much to catch up on." I sat on the edge of the sofa. I didn't take off my coat. "Let's skip the catch-up, Mom," I said, checking my watch. "You said there was a family emergency. You said we needed a meeting. I'm here. What do you want?" My father exchanged a look with Kyle. My mother twisted her hands in her lap. "We just want to be a family again," my mother started, her voice trembling. "Cut the crap, Mom," Kyle interrupted. He pushed off the mantel and walked toward me. "We know you're loaded. We saw the car. We know you sold that company or whatever you do." "I didn't sell a company," I said calmly. "I work for a living." "Whatever," Kyle waved his hand. "Here's the deal. We're in a bit of a tight spot, a temporary liquidity issue." "We?" I raised an eyebrow. "The family," my father grunted. "Your brother needs a bridge loan, just to get his new venture off the ground. And the house needs some repairs." "How much?" I asked. I wanted to hear them say the number. My mother took a deep breath. $200,000. I didn't blink. "And what do I get in return?" "What do you mean?" My father frowned. "You get the satisfaction of helping your family. You get to be a good daughter." "I see," I said. "So it's a gift, not a loan?" "We'll pay you back," Kyle said quickly, "once my app launches. Double, triple." "What app, Kyle?" I asked. "The gambling app? Or the one that tracks which lies you've told to which people?" The room went deadly silent. "Excuse me?" Kyle stepped closer, his face turning red. "I know, Kyle," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I know about the gambling debts. I know about the forged signatures on the loan you took out in Mom and Dad's name. I know everything." My parents went pale. They didn't look at me. They looked at the floor. You know?" my mother whispered. "Yes, and I know you called me here to pay off that illegal loan so Kyle doesn't go to jail. Am I right?" No one answered. The silence confirmed everything. "So," I stood up, "here is my answer." I reached into my briefcase. The tension in the room was so thick you could choke on it. My revelation had sucked the air out of the space. Kyle looked like a cornered animal, sweaty, erratic, dangerous. My parents looked like ghosts of themselves, shriveled by shame, but still clinging to their delusion. "You think you're so smart," Kyle spat, his hands balling into fists. "You don't know what it's like, the pressure, Dad always expecting me to hit a home run." So you stole from them? I asked, keeping my voice level. You forged their names? I was going to pay it back, he shouted. It was a sure thing. The investment was solid. It was a blackjack table, Kyle, I said dryly. That's not an investment. Heather, my father spoke up, his voice gruff. That's enough. What's done is done. We are dealing with it. By asking me to pay for it, I turned to him. You ignored my wedding. You ignored my life for 5 years, and now you want $200,000? Where are your parents? My mother cried out, tears finally flowing. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you did the bare minimum required by law, I said. But let's talk about the house. The roof you put over my head. I pulled out the first document from my briefcase. It wasn't the eviction notice. Not yet. It was the foreclosure notice from the bank, the one they had been hiding. I know the house is being sold next week, I said. I know you haven't paid the mortgage in 6 months because you gave all your money to Kyle. My mother gasped. How did you? It's public record, Mom. If you know where to look. We're going to lose the house, my father admitted, his shoulders slumping. He looked suddenly very old. Unless you help us, Heather. If you give us the money, we can catch up on the payments. We can save the home you grew up in. And Kyle, I asked, what happens to the forgery? We pay off the loan shark, my father said, looking at Kyle with a mix of anger and pathetic loyalty. And the problem goes away. No police, no jail. We handle it as a family. Handle it as a family? I repeated. Like you handled my college fund? My father flinched. This is different, he muttered. Is it? I walked around the coffee table. You are asking me to throw $200,000 into a black hole, because if I give you this money, Kyle will just steal it again. Or he'll find a new way to bleed you dry, and in 6 months you'll be back in foreclosure. I won't, Kyle yelled. I'm changing, I swear. You're not changing, Kyle. You're escalating. I looked at my watch. It was 4:45 p.m. Detective Miller would be getting the file from Sarah in 15 minutes. I have a counteroffer, I said. My parents looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. What is it? My mother asked. Will you write the check? No checks, I said. I'm not giving you money. I'm giving you a reality check. I pulled out the second folder, the one labeled Phoenix Holdings. I knew the bank was foreclosing, I explained, speaking slowly so they would understand every word, and I knew you wouldn't be able to stop it, so I stepped in. You paid the bank? My mother asked, her hands clasping together in prayer. Oh, Heather, thank God. Thank you. I knew you were a good girl. Kyle let out a breath of relief. See, I told you she'd cave. I didn't pay the bank off for you, I cut in, my voice sharp as a razor. I bought the debt. Confusion washed over their faces. What does that mean? My father asked. It means, I said, leaning forward, I own your mortgage now. I am the bank. You don't owe Wells Fargo anymore. You owe me. The room went silent again. But that's good, right? My mother stammered. Your family. You won't kick us out. We can work out a payment plan. Maybe defer payments for a while until Kyle gets on his feet. I looked at them. Really looked at them. They still didn't get it. They thought because we shared DNA, I was a doormat. They thought they could negotiate with me like I was still the 8-year-old girl waiting for them to show up to the spelling bee. There is no payment plan, I said. I pulled out the final document, the one with the red stamp at the top. This is a notice to quit, I said, placing it gently on the coffee table. It's the eviction process? Eviction? My father choked on the word. You are 6 months behind. You have violated the terms of the mortgage note. As the note holder, I am exercising my right to foreclose and take possession of the property. You can't do that, Kyle screamed. You can't evict your own parents. Watch me, I said. Heather, my mother stood up, shaking. You wouldn't. This is your home. Where will we go? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe you can stay with Kyle. Oh, wait, he's renting on your dime. Maybe you can get a small apartment. Dad can work a few more years. You are heartless, my mother shrieked, her face twisting into something ugly. After everything we did for you. You did nothing for me, I shouted back, my voice finally rising, the control slipping just a fraction. You ignored me. You stole my future to pay for his mistakes. You missed my wedding to go to a casino, and now you want me to save you? No, I pointed at Kyle. And as for you, I said, the eviction is the least of your worries. What are you talking about? Kyle sneered, though he looked terrified. It's 5 p.m., I said, glancing at my watch. Right now, my lawyer is handing over a file to the police. It contains Jessica's testimony, the bank records, and proof of the forged loan application. Kyle's face went gray. You called the cops? I reported a crime, I said. Identity theft is a felony, Kyle, and since the victims, Mom and Dad, were coerced into covering it up, the state is going to pick up the case. A heavy pounding on the front door interrupted us. Boom, boom, boom. Police, open up! My mother screamed. My father slumped back into his chair, clutching his chest. Kyle looked at the back door, thinking about running. Don't run, Kyle, I said calmly. My Porsche is blocking your car, and there are officers out back, too. I walked over to the door and opened it. Detective Miller stood there, grim-faced, with 2 uniformed officers behind him. Heather Miller? He asked. Heather Vance, I corrected, using my married name. Come in, detective. The man you're looking for is right there. The next 10 minutes were a blur of chaos and vindication. Kyle tried to argue. He tried to pull the "do you know who I am" card, which was laughable because he was nobody. He was a middle-aged man living off his parents' Social Security. Kyle Miller, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. Detective Miller recited the Miranda rights as he clicked the handcuffs onto Kyle's wrists. Mom, Dad, do something, Kyle yelled as they dragged him toward the door. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you signed the papers. My father stood up, his face red. Officer, wait. We can explain. We don't want to press charges. Detective Miller stopped and looked at my father with pity. Mr. Miller, the charges aren't coming from you. The lender pressed charges for the fraud, and based on the evidence provided by Mrs. Vance and the suspect's ex-wife, the district attorney is moving forward regardless of your cooperation. This is financial abuse of the elderly, sir. We're doing this to protect you. To protect them. The irony was palpable. I was sending their golden boy to jail to save them from the financial ruin he was causing, and they hated me for it. My mother was sobbing hysterically on the sofa. My baby! They're taking my baby! He's 38, Mom, I said, standing near the window as the police cruiser lights flashed against the living room walls. When the police were gone, silence crashed back into the room. It was just me and my parents. My mother stopped crying abruptly. She wiped her face and looked at me with eyes full of pure venom. Get out, she hissed. Excuse me? You heard me. She stood up, pointing a shaking finger at the door. You traitor. You come into this house, flaunt your money, buy our debt, and arrest your brother? You are no daughter of mine. I stopped being your daughter the day you chose a casino over my wedding, I said. Now I'm just your landlord. We aren't leaving, my father said, finding a scrap of defiance. We have rights, squatters' rights. You'll have to drag us out, Dad, I sighed. I'm a forensic accountant. I know the law better than you know hardware. The foreclosure process is already finalized. The deed is in my company's name. You have 30 days to vacate. If you're not out, the sheriff comes back. And next time, it won't be for Kyle. Where will we go? My father asked, his voice cracking. We have no money. You know we have no money. You have Social Security, I said, and without Kyle draining $5,000 a month from you, you might actually be able to afford a nice one-bedroom apartment. There's a senior living community across town. It's affordable. A home? My mother looked horrified. You want to put us in a home? It's better than the street, I said, which is where Kyle was taking you. I picked up my briefcase. I had said everything I needed to say. I had done what I came to do. I had stopped the bleeding. It hurt. God, it hurt to see them look at me with such hatred. But I knew I had saved them from total bankruptcy, even if they couldn't see it. One more thing, I said at the door. Don't call me. Talk to my lawyer. Sarah handles all communications for Phoenix Holdings. I walked out the door. The air outside was cool and fresh. I got into my Porsche. I started the engine. The rumble of the motor felt like a purr of approval. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw my parents standing in the window, watching me. They looked small. They looked defeated. I didn't feel happy. Vengeance isn't happy. It's not a party. It's a heavy, solemn thing. It's the feeling of correcting a balance that has been off for decades. It's the feeling of finally putting down a weight you've been carrying since you were a child. I drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. The next 30 days were a barrage of noise that I mostly ignored. My parents tried everything. They sent flying monkeys. Aunts I hadn't spoken to in years called me to tell me I was cruel. The pastor of their church, a man who had never once asked me how I was doing when I was a kid, sent me an email quoting scripture about honoring thy father and mother. I replied with a scripture about parents not provoking their children to wrath, and then I blocked him. Kyle called me from the county jail. Collect. I didn't accept the charges. Jessica, however, called me crying tears of joy. He's being held without bail because he's a flight risk, she told me. And with the fraud charges, the family court judge has suspended his visitation rights indefinitely. Lily is safe, Heather. Thank you. That was the only thank you I needed. On the 30th day, I didn't go to the house. I sent a property management team. My parents had moved out. They had trashed the place a little, left garbage on the floors, stripped the copper wiring from the basement, probably a final attempt to get cash for Kyle's lawyer. But they were gone. They moved into a small rental apartment on the south side of town. It wasn't luxury, but it was warm and dry. I knew because I had secretly paid the first 6 months of rent anonymously through the property manager. It was my final act of charity. A severance package for the job of being their daughter. I renovated the house. I tore out the carpet where I had spilled juice as a kid and got yelled at. I painted over the walls where my awards had never hung. I turned Kyle's room into a sun-drenched library. And then I sold it. I made a profit of $80,000. I took that money, added some of my own, and started a scholarship fund, the Joyce Miller Scholarship, named after my aunt, the one person in my family who had actually been kind to me before she passed away. It was for girls who wanted to study finance or law but didn't have family support. 1 year later, I was sitting in a coffee shop reviewing applications for the scholarship. I saw a girl walk in. She looked tired. She was carrying a heavy backpack and a textbook on advanced calculus. She ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a small black coffee, and sat in the corner, counting out change to leave a tip. She looked just like me at 20. I walked over to her. "Studying hard?" I asked. She looked up, startled. "Oh, yes, ma'am. Final exams." "What's your major?" "Accounting." She smiled shyly. "I want to be a forensic accountant." I smiled back, a genuine, warm smile. That's a great field. You catch the bad guys with a calculator. Exactly, she laughed. I handed her my business card. When you graduate, call this number. We're always looking for sharp minds. Wow, she looked at the card, her eyes widening. Thank you. I walked back to my car, my beautiful black Porsche. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Dinner's ready? Coming home? On my way, I typed back. I drove home, not to the house of trauma, but to the home I built with love. My parents were still alive. Kyle was in prison serving a 3-year sentence. They were part of my history, but they were no longer part of my story. I had rewritten the ending. And let me tell you, the view from the driver's seat of your own life, it's spectacular. You might think that watching the police car drive away with my brother in the back seat was the end. You might think the credits rolled right there. Justice served, game over. But real life isn't a movie. In real life, the villain doesn't just disappear. They try to burn the theater down on their way out. The days following Kyle's arrest were not quiet. They were a siege. I returned to my penthouse, hoping for peace, but my phone became a grenade I was afraid to touch. My parents didn't call me directly. My lawyer, Sarah, had terrified them enough to stop that. But they unleashed the flying monkeys. If you've ever dealt with narcissists, you know what flying monkeys are. They are the enablers, the distant relatives, the church friends who are fed a sob story and sent to do the dirty work. It started with Aunt Carol. I hadn't spoken to her since she criticized my weight at a Christmas party 10 years ago. She left a 3-minute voicemail. Heather, I don't know what kind of cold-hearted monster you've become in the city. Her voice dripped with self-righteous poison. But arresting your own brother? Evicting your elderly parents? The Bible says honor your father and mother. You are bringing shame to this family name. Then came the church. My parents had been deacons at the First Baptist Church for 30 years. They were experts at playing the pious, suffering saints. I found out later what they told the congregation. They claimed I was a corporate predator who tricked them into signing over their deed. They claimed I was jealous of Kyle's struggles and wanted to destroy him. I was at the grocery store in my old neighborhood, picking up wine for a dinner with Liam, when I ran into Mrs. Zukimis. Higgins, my old Sunday school teacher. I smiled. Hello, Mrs. Higgins. She looked at me, then looked at my cart, then looked me dead in the eye and turned her cart around without saying a word. The silence was louder than a slap. I stood there in the pasta aisle, gripping the handle of my cart until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just rejection. It was a coordinated smear campaign. My parents were willing to destroy my reputation to protect their narrative. They couldn't be the bad guys who stole from their daughter and committed fraud, so I had to be the villain who abandoned them. That night, I sat on my balcony, shaking. They're winning, I whispered to Liam. Everyone thinks I'm the monster. Liam took my hand. Heather, they aren't winning. They're flailing. These people, Mrs. Higgins, Aunt Carol, they don't pay your bills. They don't sleep in your bed. They don't know the truth. And the truth is sitting in a police evidence locker. But it hurts, I admitted. It hurts to be the bad guy in their story. You're not the bad guy, Liam said firmly. You're the protagonist who finally stopped taking the abuse. And sometimes, to the abuser, the person who sets boundaries looks like the villain. He was right. I had to stop caring about the court of public opinion and focus on the actual court of law. Because while the community was whispering, the district attorney was working. Kyle's bail hearing was scheduled. And my parents were planning one last desperate Hail Mary to save him. I received a notification from Sarah. Subject: Witness list for Kyle Miller's preliminary hearing. I opened the attachment. There, under defense witnesses, were 2 names. Robert Miller, Brenda Miller. They were going to testify. They were going to go under oath and try to say that they allowed Kyle to sign their names. They were going to perjure themselves to save the golden child. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. If they wanted to judge, I couldn't stop them, but I could make sure the judge saw the truth. I went to my safe and pulled out the USB drive Jessica had given me. There was one audio file I hadn't played for the police yet because I thought it was too personal, too cruel. It was a recording of a phone call between Kyle and my mother, recorded by an app on Kyle's phone that Jessica had accessed. In the recording, my mother wasn't the victim. She was the architect. I put the USB drive in my purse. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "If you want war, let's go to court." The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old paper. It was sterile, cold, and utterly devoid of the warmth my family claimed to value. I sat in the back row with Sarah. I wasn't required to be there, but I needed to see this. I needed to see the mechanism of justice grind my brother's entitlement into dust. Kyle was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. It was shocking to see him without his designer clothes, without the gel in his hair. He looked smaller. He scanned the room, saw our parents in the second row, and gave them a pathetic, pleading look. He didn't look at me. The hearing was to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial and to address the bail conditions. My father was called to the stand. Robert Miller walked up slowly, using a cane I had never seen him use before. It was a prop, a sympathy tool. He swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. "Mr. Miller," the defense attorney began, "regarding the loan application in question, did your son, Kyle Miller, sign your name without your permission?" My father looked at Kyle. Then he looked at the judge. He took a shaky breath. "No," he lied. His voice rasped. We gave him verbal permission." "He has power of attorney in our hearts. We told him to do whatever was necessary. He didn't steal our identity. We share everything." A murmur went through the court. It was a lie, a blatant protect the boy at all costs lie. If the judge believed this, the fraud charges would be dropped. Kyle would walk free, and I would be the crazy sister who called the cops for nothing. The prosecutor stood up. She was a sharp woman named Martinez. She didn't look impressed by my father's cane. "Mr. Miller," she said, "if you gave him permission, why did you call your daughter, Heather Vance, on October 12th, stating that, and I quote from the police report of your statement at the scene, 'Kyle has ruined us'?" "I was emotional," my father stammered. "I was confused." "I see," Martinez said. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to submit a piece of supplemental evidence, digital forensic audio recovered from the defendant's cloud account." My parents froze. Kyle's head snapped up. Sarah squeezed my knee under the table. This was it. The judge nodded. "Proceed." The audio played over the courtroom speakers. It was crisp and clear. It was a phone call dated 3 months prior. Voice of Brenda Miller. "Kyle, you have to fix this. The bank called again. They know the signature isn't right. They said it looks traced." Voice of Kyle. "Relax, Mom. Just tell them Dad has a tremor. Deny everything. If they push, we'll just say Heather did it. She handles money, right? We can pin it on her." "We can't, well, maybe, if it keeps you out of trouble." "But you promised that money would double, Kyle. We need it back." "I'm working on it. Just stall them. Don't let Dad talk to anyone." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I looked at my parents. My mother had her hand over her mouth, her face the color of ash. My father was staring at his hands, his cane, forgotten, leaning against the rail. They had just been exposed not only as liars, but as conspirators who were willing to frame me, their daughter, to save their son. Mr. Miller, the prosecutor said, her voice icy, did you just commit perjury in this courtroom? My father didn't answer. He couldn't. The judge banged his gavel. The witness will step down. I am revoking bail for the defendant. And I am recommending the district attorney review the transcripts of this hearing for potential obstruction of justice charges against Mr. and Mrs. Miller. My mother let out a wail that wasn't sad. It was the sound of a trapped animal. I stood up. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just felt a heavy, profound sense of finality. I walked out of the courtroom while the bailiff was moving toward my parents. I didn't stay to watch them get a warning or get arrested. It didn't matter. The spell was broken. The golden child myth was destroyed by his own voice on a recording, and the saintly parent's mask had slipped, revealing the rot underneath. I walked out into the sunlight and took a deep breath. The air tasted different. It tasted like truth. It's over, I said to Sarah. The criminal part is over, she nodded. Now we have to finish the eviction. The 30 days are up on Monday. I'll be there, I said. I need to close the door myself. Monday morning came with a gray drizzle, fitting weather for an execution of the past. I parked my Porsche in the driveway of 42 Oak Street. The house was silent. The curtains were drawn. The for sale sign, which I hadn't put up, but my parents had frantically tried to install before realizing they didn't own the house anymore, was lying face down in the overgrown grass. I met the sheriff's deputy at the door. Miss Vance, he tipped his hat. The premises should be vacated. We did a knock and announce an hour ago. No answer. Thank you, deputy. I have the keys. I unlocked the front door. It swung open with a familiar creak, the same creak I used to listen for when I was sneaking in late after studying at the library. The house was empty, but it wasn't clean. It looked like a tornado had hit it. My parents, in their hasty and angry departure, had left behind a mess of trash, unwanted furniture, and debris. It was a final middle finger to me. You want the house? You clean it. I walked through the living room. The outline of the TV was still on the wall where the dust had settled. The recliner where my father had ignored me for 20 years was gone, leaving 4 indentations in the carpet. I walked into the kitchen. On the counter, there was a stack of papers. I picked them up. They were my old report cards, my certificates, my college acceptance letter to Duke. They had been kept in a junk drawer. They were stained with coffee rings and crinkled. I walked down the hall to Kyle's room. The door was open, and there, on the wall, was the shrine. They had left it, framed photos of Kyle playing soccer, Kyle's participation trophies, a newspaper clipping from when Kyle won a raffle at a local fair. It was all pristine, dusted, and hung with care. In my room, the small one at the end of the hall, there was nothing, just bare walls and a single broken hanger on the floor. It was the physical manifestation of my entire life. I was the junk drawer, he was the gallery. I stood in the center of the empty room, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not the polite single tear at a wedding. I sobbed. I wailed. I mourned the little girl who slept in this room and prayed every night that tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, they would look at her the way they looked at him. I mourned the parents I never had. But as the tears stopped, clarity returned. I looked around the room. Get out, I said to the ghosts. Get out of my head. I went out to my car and grabbed a heavy-duty trash bag. I went into Kyle's room. I took the frames off the wall. Crash, into the bag. The participation trophies, clatter, into the bag. The dusty ribbons, into the bag. I stripped the house of every remnant of the Miller family shrine. Then I went to the kitchen. I took my report cards, my Duke letter. I didn't throw them away. I folded them neatly and put them in my purse. Not because I needed their validation anymore, but because I was reclaiming my history. These were mine. They belong to me, not their junk drawer. I called a contractor I knew. "Hey Mike, it's Heather. I need a full crew at 42 Oak Street. Got it. New floors, new paint, new fixtures. I want everything white, bright, and clean. I want to erase the last 30 years. "You got it, boss. When do we start?" "Now," I said. "Start now." I walked out of the house and locked the door. I didn't look back at the window. There was no one there to watch me leave. The ghosts were gone. I had evicted them. Driving away, I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my life. The physical act of clearing that house had cleared something in my soul. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to get it. I had accepted the reality. I was an orphan with living parents, and that was okay, because I was also a strong, wealthy, successful woman with a husband who adored me and a future that was entirely my own. And I had a plan for that money. The profit from this house wasn't going to buy me a new purse. It was going to buy freedom for someone else. 1 year later. The ballroom at the downtown Marriott was buzzing with low chatter and the clinking of silverware. I stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of faces. Liam was at the front table, giving me a thumbs up. Behind me, a large banner read, "The Joyce Miller Scholarship Fund Inaugural Gala." "Thank you all for coming," I said into the microphone. My voice didn't shake. Many of you know me as a forensic accountant. I spend my days looking for hidden money, for lies, for theft. But today, I want to talk about investment, not in stocks, but in people, specifically in the invisible children, the ones who do their homework without being asked, the ones who win awards that no one attends the ceremony for, the ones who are told they are low maintenance, as if that's a compliment, when really it just means they are neglected. I saw a few women in the audience nod, dabbing their eyes. I knew my story wasn't unique. That was the tragedy of it. I sold my childhood home this year, I continued. I sold the place where I learned that my achievements didn't matter. And I used every penny of that sale to start this fund, so that no girl has to give up her dream of Duke or Harvard or NASA because her family's resources were allocated to someone else. Applause broke out, genuine, warm applause. I would like to introduce our first recipient, I gestured to the side of the stage, Maya Harrison. Maya walked onto the stage. She was 18, brilliant, and fierce. She had escaped a home situation eerily similar to mine. She was going to study astrophysics. When I handed her the oversized check, enough to cover her full tuition, she hugged me. It wasn't a polite hug. She clung to me. "Thank you," she whispered into my ear. "You saw me." "I see you, Maya," I whispered back. "I will always see you." That moment was worth more than any apology my parents could ever give me. It was the transmutation of lead into gold. I had taken my pain and turned it into power for someone else. The gala was a massive success. We raised over $500,000 that night. As Liam and I were leaving the hotel, walking toward the valet stand to get my Porsche, I saw them. It was a coincidence, or maybe the universe's final little wink. Across the street, waiting at a bus stop, were two elderly people. The man was leaning heavily on a walker. The woman was holding a plastic grocery bag that looked heavy. They looked gray, tired, and small. It was Robert and Brenda. They were arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the body language. My mother was nagging him. He was waving her off. They looked miserable. They looked like two people trapped in a cage of their own making, with no golden child to distract them from their own unhappiness. Liam stiffened beside me. "Do you want to go over there?" I looked at them. I thought about the rage I used to feel. I thought about the 3 empty chairs at my wedding. I thought about the forged signature. And I realized I felt nothing. Not hate, not love, Just a distant, detached pity. They were strangers, just two bitter old people waiting for a bus in the cold. No, I said, turning away. I have everything I need right here. The valet pulled up in my Porsche. I tipped him $50, because I could. I slid into the driver's seat. The leather was warm. The engine purred. Liam got in beside me and put his hand on my thigh. "Where to, Mrs. Vance?" he asked. "Home," I smiled. "Real home." I pulled out into traffic, merging seamlessly into the flow of the city lights. I didn't look at the bus stop as I passed it. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. My parents had ignored my wedding. They had ignored my life. But in the end, their neglect was the fire that forged me. They wanted me to be invisible? Fine. I became invisible to them. But to the rest of the world, to Maya, to Liam, to myself, I was shining. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit that subscribe button. We are building a family here, a real one. Thanks for watching.